our Renew for Change lecture, actually not really a lecture, it's an event. I can't believe you're here. We have what, snow, sleet, rain, God forbid, all elements this week. Traffic, that's right. So thanks a bunch for coming, and I think you're going to be very, very happy you came. Before I introduce our speaker, I have this kind of show and tell. This is Candyland. Remember that game when you were little?
Yeah.
Candyland? Candyland? Okay, look at the gumdrops, gingerbread men. Okay, this is Candyland as it should be. Thank you to Mo. And I'm going to pass this around with me because you have to take the time and look. Instead of the gumdrops, you have all these little program comments. In fact, she really, and I don't know if you intended to do this, but this is awesome. You really kind of heavy loaded it to the beginning, right? So when you start making your change, you gotta come more frequently and kind of get your balance and kind of get your groove and see what's going on. So there's a lot of activity in the very beginning. And halfway through this turn, it says, there's Carrie, it says, make an appointment. So I love that part. And then there's this like brownie slide, right? So like you're I don't know if you roll certain dice, and instead of hitting a brownie though, it doesn't mean you're failing. You don't go back to the beginning. That means you're just kind of regrouping, right? So this is just a great little graphic, and please enjoy it as you pass it around. So I'm pleased to have George Wong here today from Vita Therapeutics, and he's an amazing, as I've heard, physical therapist, doctor of physical therapy. Our very own Dee can attest to that. And the concept today was really to talk about exercise and recover from injuries and so forth, but I think it's going to also be very interactive. So I'm going to toss this over to you, and we'll just kind of join in the fun. Great.
Like Dr. B said, my name is George Wong. I'm a physical therapist. I've been in the field for over 10 years. And just a little background about me, like who's this guy, right? I don't have a really cool story about how I got into physical therapy. Just by the grace of God, I just met the right people, and that whole, it's about who you know, not necessarily what you know. You just kind of start talking to people, and it's like, wow, I really like this field because it's movement. I enjoy being active, and at the time, I pretty much injured pretty much every part of my body at some point or another, just due to just being haphazardly moving. And I grew up in Indiana, discovered my passion is rock climbing. So I came out here and to the lovely Seattle Pacific Northwest, and my goal was to go on a rampage, but I quickly found my better half, and I settled down and I filled out life insurance. And life insurance for a rock climber, I was like, oh my goodness. And so I toned it down a little bit, but I still enjoy like the aspects of everything and just movement in general. And so it's been great. I have a fellowship in applied functional science, and that is just a fancy way of saying I'm good, I'm okay. I'm not proud enough to think I know everything or that I can see everything, but just taking the science, what we all have learned in anatomy, physiology classes, and just applying just function to it. Like we're upright most of the time, and for those of you guys that have lower back problems, it's usually not because you've been laying down and moving in bed. It's usually when you're upright. So what is it about the body whenever it's upright? You have to fight against gravity. What's gravity doing to your body just constantly, and just how to utilize your body against all the different ways that you stress it throughout the day, and how to do it healthy, right? And it's a fellowship based out in Michigan, so I flew out there to Adrian, Michigan. If anyone knows where that is, it's really not much to the town other than just this institute. And it was amazing. It was life-changing, if you will. And it's called the GIFT program, and it's based on the principle that we all have gifts to offer each other. And the greatest gift that you can give somebody is their livelihood. It's about relationships. It's about connection. It's about just being one with one another. So whenever Dr. D mentioned this, or Dee, I should say, and then Dr. B invited me, it's been amazing. Like, you guys are really doing it, and it's great just to kind of see all the changes that's, from Dee's life. It's been very, very cool. So I'm excited to be here. Like Dr. D mentioned, I work for Vita Integrated Health, which is actually run by a chiropractor just down the road. And if you guys know anything about physical therapy, there's always like this turf war between chiropractics and physical therapists, and which kind of sparked my interest because pretty much every patient that I see has had some other form of medicine and or some more discipline. So I thought it was interesting that this was able to integrate the care, and it made a lot of sense. It was very progressively thinking, and it works. And I know state laws doesn't necessarily allow me to do certain things, but a chiropractor can. So, you know, it's teamwork making the dream work, right? So, I tend to go on a lot of tangents, so it's going to be pretty laid back. Where I'm going to have you guys up and down from the chairs just to have you guys move around. And if you guys have any questions, general questions, feel free to interrupt me. I'll save specific questions. It's not a lot of people, so if there's specific injuries or anything like that from a physical therapy standpoint, if I can attest to it, then I'll definitely, we can save some of those questions for the end. Sound good? All right. The objectives there, I'll try to follow them, but you know, as you start talking and going on tangents, you kind of forget about certain things. But identifying how to keep tissues healthy and happy, right? So everybody's been sitting for maybe about 15, 20 minutes now, so I'm going to have everybody stand up, right? So after you've been sitting for a long period of time, back in a road trip or anything like that, it feels so good to stand up, right? And then after you've been standing in line for a while or at the grocery store, it feels so amazing to sit down. So the idea is that movement is kind of the key, right? So everybody just kind of move the hips around, right? And you know, if obviously you guys have any pain, let me know or stop. Just you know your body better than I do. So there's all these different moves that you can do. You can bend over and just gets the blood flowing, right? So okay, great, good job, sit down. So everybody probably feels a little bit better now. I think so anyways. But our bodies are made up of 60% water, right? It's a lot of fluids, right? There's 4 to 5 liters of blood pumping through your body, so movement's kind of the key. If you think about like a puddle of water that's just stagnant and yucky and gross and just laying there, that's why you're not supposed to drink lake water, right? And so if you come to water, you want to make sure that's flowing, and that way things are kind of moving around. And so your body being so much water, it's all about just movement, right? And so with movement, you start hydrating tissues. You start breathing a little heavier so you can get more oxygen to muscles. And if there's one thing that we know, like our bodies can't survive without oxygen and fluids. So if you just think about it from like a very basic standpoint, like movement's kind of how your body stays healthy. And with the world that we live in today, everything's very sedentary. From commutes are becoming longer, people are getting caught up in traffic, a little bit more, and desk work, right? And even to maximize productivity, instead of like having the printer way over there forcing you to get up, there's a printer right there, so you just have to turn around and do all these different things. So if you think about it, like it's a lot of stress to the body, and there's a lot of stagnation that's kind of happening in the body. So if you guys can get up and move, that's going to be kind of the key to making sure that you guys prevent injuries and staying healthy. And so now comes the questions like, what if I'm in pain? What if I'm hurting? Or since I got injured, I'm a little hesitant with certain things. And so, and that's where I guess we would kind of come into play. Just knowledge is power. The more that you understand, then you can feel like you're a little bit more in charge of your body. And Dee, I apologize. You're going to hear a lot of the same stuff that I probably flap my gums to do. But I can be loud. Sorry. So if you think about how to apply movement to your body, you want to think about a spectrum, right? When people think of exercise, they think about going to the gym and picking up some weights and just moving their body. If you start strengthening, I guess depending on which way you guys are standing, but this is the beginning here. Okay? If you start strengthening something right here, then you start introducing external loads to the area. And so instead of like starting out with strengthening, the strengthening conditioning should be over here. You can't strengthen and condition something you don't have. So mobility and the way to move is actually the start, okay? And I'll define kind of what all this is and just kind of give examples so you can wrap your head around what mobility is. And then once you have the movement, you need to be able to control it, okay? So that's where stability kind of comes into play. Stability is just a fancy way of saying, can you move your body from point A to point B without hurting yourself? Can you control it, right? Most of us can do various things, but most people get hurt whenever they take their bodies in abnormal positions, and that's where everything kind of hits the fan, right? And then once you have the mobility and stability, you want to have movement with control. You need to be able to do the activities that you want to do and control it. Otherwise, you're either going to fall and hurt yourself, or two, you might kind of feel a little tweak somewhere. And then once you can do it, great. Now you start loading it up with more weight. You can do it, great. Do 50 of them now. You know, just so you start etching in like good movement patterns. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Okay, so a good example, I'm going to just have everybody do this, right? I want you guys to sit toward the edge of your chair, okay? I just want you guys just to slouch, right? All right, just really that. Now, everybody, if you guys don't have any shoulder issues, so safety first. If you guys don't have any shoulder issues, I just want you to raise both your arms up over your head, okay? So in this position, it's kind of hard, and most people kind of got impinged a little bit, right? And so, okay, good job, bring your arms down. Now, sit up nice and tall. What good posture is, right? Good posture, and you start moving. Perfect, right? Everybody has better motion. And just by moving in a good position. So a lot of people, I think we all know those people, have a very, what's called a kyphotic posture. And so instead of just taking, right, driving, everything you do is in front of you, right? Whether it's folding laundry, to washing your face in the morning, to eating, to just doing anything, right? So naturally gravity's pulling your body forward. And so your body's going to find its way forward just naturally. If you have fallen asleep, for instance, sitting up, right, what does your head do? It just kind of drops forward. So there's this momentum that's always kind of going forward. And if you don't have the mobility in the middle part of your back, then as you start doing things like over your head, then you're just going to start kinking up your shoulders. Does that make sense? So a lot of people who have had like a rotator cuff injury or an impingement of some sort, 9 times out of 10, where we start is just trying to get more mobility back into the middle part of their spine. Okay.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
one of my most frequent phone calls when one of my patients has hurt themselves is not because they are powering, down Mount Slope or they're, booking at the gym. They were sitting on their couch at home watching TV, and they reached over for the remote, and they go, ah! Or they're just standing, they reached over a piece of paper on the floor, like a letter, an envelope, and they suddenly can't move because they're paralyzed. It's just simple things. They're not exercising, but their body movement's all off, and then whammo, 3 weeks of no work, and they're getting rehab, and it's like,
Unfortunately, right?
It's crazy.
Yeah. And, we're all athletes for the sense of the word, right? An athlete is somebody who requires energy to be able to sustain activities, by definition, if you guys look at Posture. And so even like your desk jockeys, like you guys have to condition yourselves to really be able to put in that 40 hours a week to be able to do that type of activity, which is a lot. And so if you're in that position, that's just an example of how our bodies are basically creatures of habit. So whenever you start moving a little bit more efficiently, right, just whether it's just going the exact opposite way, or just doing something that you guys want to do, then it's just healthier, right? You're just moving your body a little more. I keep saying that. And there's no wrong way to move as long as you're moving. It's where if you move without controlling the movement, that's where injuries can happen, right? And so if you look at how injuries happen in the first place, they all have one thing in common. It's too much uncontrolled movement happening at one spot. And if you take just any example of a musculoskeletal injury, not necessarily a trauma, so I can't attest to that, but from a herniated disc in the lower back, right? We've all known somebody, hopefully, chances are somebody's had it, right? Anybody had back issues before, right? So, sorry. So the lower back If there's too much uncontrolled movement happening at that lower back, that's eventually where the disc is going to have too much irritation, and eventually it's going to blow. And if you think about a fracture, there's uncontrolled movement. And that uncontrolled movement can be an internal force or it can be an external force. So if you have too much movement happening at one spot, that eventually causes the bone to break, right? People will tear their ACLs or ligaments in their knee if their knee kind of goes to a certain point and it just kind of collapses on them, right? Even concussions, there's too much uncontrolled movement happening at one spot that eventually causes the brain to hit the skull, that causes the bruise to happen. So if we can control the movement, that's going to be kind of the key to success and a key to preventing injuries the best you can, right? So for example, I had a volleyball player who came in, and I just had her do like arms up over the head, and what I had her do, I had her rotate this way, right, and side bend, and then I was like, okay, hold that position, and I want you to squat for me. And then, right, really weird. What does her knee do? Whoa, it goes in there. And there's this big misnomer about like the knee shouldn't go in. Oh my goodness, don't let the knee go in. And she's like, I'm never going to have to do this. I was like, you know what? You do this every day. And whenever you go up, right, if you like are off balance trying to do something like this, and you're going to come down, and if you're not used to it, and you land that way, that's where the ACL is going to blow. Because you can't control that movement. So if you never introduce your body to these types of movements, then life will happen, right? You're going to have to do that, and that's where things can get a little ugly, okay? Does that mean by doing 10 of those a day, you're going to prevent that from ever happening? Not necessarily, but at least you're taking your body into these positions, you're moving into the position, and your body's like, wow, thank you. I understand what's happening here. I can recruit the right muscles. I can recruit the right proprioceptors. We'll talk about those different proprioceptors here in a little bit. And now I can get myself into that position and I can pull myself away from it and without injury. Does that make sense? Okay. So why injuries happen? We talked about discs. We talked about fractures, ligaments, concussions. And if you break the movements down to its purest form, you have to be able to control 3 planes of movement. And every joint, every bone, every muscle in your body wants to be stressed in 3 different planes of movement. If you don't incorporate these different planes, then you start etching in patterns, right? And you start developing habits, which isn't necessarily a bad thing as long as you're developing good habits. But we've all had a couple of like bad habits, right? And so, just for example, we're going to have everybody stand up now. Okay, and we're going to do squats. Okay? Now, squat by definition is 2 feet on the ground and you're just bending the knees, right? So it doesn't have to be like one of those like down and dirty squats, right? It could be like a little mini lunge as long as you're just bending the knees. So go do whatever you feel comfortable with, okay? So perfect, good job. All right, now I want you to stand
We
with
take
your...
plays class.
Yeah.
We can do
exercise classes too.
Perfect, great. Okay, so that's your normal width, shoulder width apart, whatever, okay? And I want you to just to take your feet out just a little wider, and I want you to do another squat. Perfect, okay? And I want you to take your feet really close in now, or closer just a smidge, right? I want you guys to just do a little squat. Great, now I want you to turn your feet out, okay? Whatever's comfortable for you in, and just do a little squat, okay? Some are going to feel weird, some are going to feel, oh, it actually feels a little better. Okay, now I want you to turn your feet in just a pinch. Don't go crazy, right? And as you do that, your knees are going to go in, and that's okay, right? And now I want you to just put one foot in front of the other, pick a foot, because you're obviously going to be doing the other foot if you haven't guessed, right? And then just do a little squat, okay? And then we're going to go the other foot. Perfect. Good job, everybody. Give yourselves a hand. All right. So you guys just did 8 squats, okay, right? And if I had somebody do 50 squats, do you think it's going to, you guys can sit up, yeah, good job. So if I had somebody do 50 squats, do you think it's going to behoove them to load it up and do 50 of the same way? Or do you think it's going to behoove them functionally, active, just day-to-day things? When you go find a seat, it's more like, oh, one foot's in front of the other, right? It's not necessarily this. squatting out all the time. And although maybe we should do that, but it's not real, right? And so if you can tweak those little feet positions, you just messed with those 3 planes of movement, right? And so those planes are, you have a vertical plane, which is the sagittal plane, right? So if I had you put your feet this way, right? That's the sagittal vertical plane. Then you have this frontal plane, which is a horizontal, so feet wider, feet in. And then you have this rotational transverse plane, which feet out and feet in, or toe in, toe out, I should say. And you can do it in combination of those, right? And so, and that's kind of, and you just loaded up those knees in all these different places, and so you've hydrated the knees in different ways to be able to facilitate healing, to be able to make sure things aren't just kind of grooving into certain patterns, and people's joints stay a little bit healthier, right, as you start doing things a little bit differently. Does that make sense? Okay, any questions so far? All right. I realize that a lot of this stuff might be, the example I give is like watching, like back in physics class when a teacher's doing like a problem on the board. And it makes so much sense whenever he's doing it, but then when you get the sheet of paper when it comes to test time, you're like, what is happening, right? And so, if there's any questions or anything like that, again, please just let me know. So 3 planes of movement, and functionally speaking, the things that you guys want to do, and I'll tie this all back into like how to prevent injuries and like recovering from injuries again a little bit later. But the way that, it doesn't matter what you're doing, whether it's just walking, there's always going to be planes of movement. So like if you, for example, with my hips, walking is something that we all do, right? So whenever you're walking, you take a step. When that knee bends, the hip is going to flex a little bit, okay? It's just what's going to happen. And so therefore, that actually is that vertical plane in the hips. And whenever you take a step with that same step, your arms are also moving. So whenever your arms move this way, you're actually rotating the hips. Does that make sense? Everybody see that? And then when you take the same step, you don't walk like this, right? There's this shifting of the hips that occurs to make sure that your center of gravity is loaded on a certain place of your body. That way you're not in an awkward position. So just from each step that you take, you are moving the hips in all these different planes. And so oftentimes when people have trouble, like when they're walking, whether it's loading it up or whether it's on the back of the leg and have to propel themselves forward, like just oftentimes just messing with those different planes of movement will help out just to kind of give that joint a little bit more nourishment, okay? And so kind of going back to how to prevent injuries and how to treat injuries, whenever you're doing certain rehabilitation exercises, whether it's you Google it online, whether it's asking a friend what they did, those are all great advices. With every exercise that you get, every exercise can be manipulated into 3 planes, okay? So, as an example, you guys don't have to do this, I'll demonstrate this one. Okay, so you're on the floor. Okay, so everybody knows this little back bridge, right?
Yep.
Right? So as you do this back bridge, just as an example, you can do that, it feels pretty good. Or you can actually just put one of your feet back or forth, so you just play with those different dimensions again. And then you put your feet out, put your feet in, okay? And just do different bridges. So it's the same thing that you guys have probably done before at one point in your life, but it's just different ways of tweaking the knee. Okay, as you're doing this, you're loading up the knees in different positions. And then also, you can also facilitate movement with the hips, right? So as your hips are going back and forth, okay, you can also bridge up and have you maybe kind of throw your hips side to side and you start recruiting the same muscles just in different ways. Or you can have your bridge up and just kind of drop your hips side to side, so you're rotating the hips in different ways. And so it's the concept of cross-train. Think about what activity that you guys are doing, what your body needs, and just being able to play and have fun with it, right? So I can geek out on this stuff a lot, and it just makes it more interesting. It allows you to go to the gym, and allows you to understand your body a little bit more, and allows you to okay, there's so many different ways I can make something a little harder as opposed to just picking up more weight. Or there's ways I can make things a little bit more authentic to what I want as opposed to just doing more repetitions. And it just makes exercising more fun. It makes it more variable, and hopefully you have fun whenever you're there. And I don't think, sometimes we did like new stuff, or most of the days we did new stuff, right? But very seldom do I give people the same things. Maybe your home exercise might stay the same because that's what you need to develop a little bit more. But when you come, it's just a little different each time. Okay. Does that make sense? All right. So discuss why we move, what's important to move, and the importance of stretching. So, sorry, I forgot about that. So stretching is basically just taking your body into different positions and holding it. And this is key to improving overall health and mobility. So this is the whole, can you do this, this, and that during this activity? No, you can't. Okay, well, you might want to stretch a little bit. And so, for instance, like a squat, when you do a squat, if you look at my knees, or if you look at my ankles here, when I do a squat, you have to be able to pull that foot up, right? And whenever people are sleeping, they naturally have this flex position the other way, and then you put some blankets on it, right? And it's just even more facilitated there. So a lot of people, about 95% of people have tight calves. And so if they start doing squats, they're going to realize that they stop in certain positions and they might kind of dive forward or do something. So a lot of people have a hard time really getting down low. Is that something that you all need to do? Not necessarily, but if it's something that you're going to load up 225 pounds, then yeah, you better be able to do that. And so just the stretch, right? You're just stretching out certain tissues. And then there's also a concept of like moving your fascia, right? Fascia is this hot term that's been researched, and what they're finding is that, nobody really knows what fascia is truly made out of, right? It has some vascular properties, it has some neurological properties, it has some tendinous properties so it can contract a little bit. And so the idea is that it's just this layer, and it's just really tight, and it's all throughout our body, from your toes all the way to the base of your skull. And so if you think about your fascia being this big tent, the more points of contact that you have fixed on something, the tighter the tent's going to be. So whenever you're stretching it, so here's where we're going to stand up, everybody. Okay, so I just want everybody just to take just a normal step forward, okay? So you're in that position. And then if I just told everybody to reach their arms straight up toward the ceiling, does everybody kind of feel a little stretch through here? Okay, so just by lifting your arms up, you guys are tensing this whole chain through here, okay? Everybody bring their arms down. Okay, so if you guys are in that same position, so whichever foot is in the back, that's the hand I want you to raise up, okay? And then just by raising, and then I want you to side bend to the other direction, and now everybody should feel a little bit more of a stretch onto the side, right? And so there's this connection between the shoulder and the hips whenever you start doing certain things, and so a lot of people who have like shoulder issues, they might have really tight hips, right? And so I say that so whenever you guys are stretching certain things out, it's good to stretch out the actual muscle itself, but really making sure that you guys are moving the whole body, right? So as far as like injuries are concerned, how many people have had a shoulder issue before, right? Okay, sorry. So if this shoulder is all agitated, right, it's just really gummed up through here. And so as exercises really target this particular area, and you can do massages and it's going to break it up, or it might agitate it a little bit more. We've all had maybe a bad massage before in our day. And then you've also been doing like exercises to try to strengthen it, and it just agitates it even more, and then eventually you kind of let it calm down and it eventually goes away. But then you never really truly test it out because you're fearful of certain things, right? And so we've all kind of been there at some point. So if this sucker is really agitated, like if you guys just kind of start from like stretching out your hips, Like if I were to stretch out the hips on this side, it's going to kind of pull a little bit here, and it's going to start unloading some of that stress onto there, right? I might stretch this hip out a little bit, and I start pulling in here. I might start stretching out the back here. As I stretch out the back, it's going to start pulling a little bit more, right? As I start side bending through here, it's really going to start unloading it. So if you think about, again, why injuries happen, too much movement at one particular spot, it's going to behoove you just to get up and start moving. If this area is really inflamed, what's inflammation? It's just a lot of irritation in there. It's a lot of blood flow because your nerves are really heightened. So if you have 4.5 to 5 liters of blood, then you will, yeah, there you go. Okay, everybody sit down. If you guys have that much blood, if you guys start working your butts and working your legs, then you're going to get more blood flow down to this area, and that's going to allow the replenishment of blood to kind of flush out of that area. So when people are rehabbing from injuries, it's important not just to focus on this guy, or if you're so worried about here, you know, as you bend forward like this, as you do certain things with your legs, you just move your shoulder, right? If you go do something like this, you just move your shoulder back, so you're indirectly still getting some movements to the shoulder. Does that make sense? So that's just basically just highlighting the importance of just moving around a little bit more, right? So if you have some shoulder issues, it's okay to do some of those squats, and which a lot of people are pleasantly surprised. It's like, wow, it actually feels a lot better on my shoulder because you're just getting the movement, getting that stagnation out. Does that make sense? Okay. Does that beg any questions? Okay. So once you have that motion that we talked about, then you have to control that motion. So here's where stability kind of comes into play. And stability, the best way that I can describe stability is being able to control your body from one point to another. Because that's where a lot of injuries happen, whether it's that gentleman who was reaching, right? Or a lot of people, it's not so much whenever they, it's usually like the bending over aspect of it. It's not the end range that bothers them, it's the act of it actually happening. Yoga is amazing. One of the, like with every strength there's a weakness, right? And so one of the faults in yoga is that it doesn't necessarily, a lot of people don't necessarily care about what it looks like to get to position 1 to position 2. They just care about whether or not you can actually accomplish position 2. Does that make sense? And so your body's so amazing that it will change and it will adapt and it will compensate any way that you can, because we're all super competitive, right? To a certain degree, because we remember what it was like, and now we necessarily don't have it, and we want to prove to ourselves that we still have it. And so is that a bad thing? Not necessarily, but you just want to be a little careful, right? So stability, I want to use walking as an example. A lot of people have a hard time balancing on one leg, right? And everybody, I've heard people say like, oh, I've never had good balance before, or I used to have it, now I don't know what happened. And as people get older, one of the biggest fears that people have is actually falling, right? Because you have to get up. And it's a very real thing. And the people that I talk to, you know, people break down in tears because of it, you know, whether it's like they have a parent that's kind of fallen and broken it. So stability is actually really important. And stability doesn't have to be just standing on one leg. It can be just challenging your balance in certain positions. And so when I had you guys do this position and then have you stretch, like by show of hands, how many people maybe kind of stumbled a little bit, right? So we all have like some sort of stability. Does that mean you guys are back people? No. It just means that, okay, that's your starting point. Okay, if you're unsuccessful with that, great, we're going to give you something you're successful with. And if I want to give it to you at home, you better believe you're going to be successful with it, because I don't want anybody falling and saying, well, I was doing my exercising. So, you know, that's just not good. That's good. So if you guys break down what walking is a series of single leg balancing activities from one leg to the other. And then that control is when that foot hits the ground, muscles need to activate and be able to load up that leg in the drop of a hat and then go off to the next foot. So that you're basically losing your balance and catching it, and then activating certain muscles. And if your muscles don't necessarily know how to activate appropriately whenever you take that step, that's where, you know, certain things can start hurting, right? So maybe it doesn't hurt to walk around the house, but whenever you go into the community, you're like, gosh, I can only get a couple blocks, I can only do this. So stability, once you have that mobility, you want to make sure you can control it. So standing on one leg is a good exercise. I've had, you know, that's one of my go-to exercises I just give everybody, because everybody needs a little bit more stability in their life, right? We're all a little dysfunctional. We don't all just need a little more stability in our life. I had one more example I was going to do. I don't know if I'm going to do it. Why not? Can I have a volunteer? All right. I'm going to have you do lunges. Okay. All right. How you doing? Good. What's your name? John. John, everybody. All right. So what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you face this camera, and what I want you to do is I just want you to pick a leg. I don't care which leg you do, and I just want you to kind of reach back, okay, and do a little tip tap. Good. Okay. And then I want you to come back to the home. Good. Come back. Come home. I just want you to do that about 6 times. Okay. So he's doing some backwards lunges. 3 more. More? Yeah. 3 more. Okay. So he chose that foot. Okay. He chose that foot. Does that make him a bad person, as we established before? No. Okay. He favors that foot. Now I want you to do 6 times on the other leg. Okay. So right. So he's gonna not like it as much. Right? And again, he's not a bad person, he's just a little unstable, right? So if you think about why we're creatures of habit, you know, each time that you take that first step, right, that's one more than that sucker. Thank you. And we're all like that. I'm not any different. You have me do one side, you know, it might not be as obvious, but it's definitely there, right? And so each time that you guys put your keys in your pocket, right, it's always going into one pocket. You guys load up on one side. Man, it's on this side, right? Everybody been there? Just me? Right? And each time that you go up a step, you're loading up with one leg, so that one leg becomes more stable than others. And 9 times out of 10, it's usually that leg that gets a little hurt. It's like you're dominant, and that's not because you've overworked it. It's usually because this one's a little less stable. So as you're taking a step, all right, if you don't have the control over this leg, when this leg hits the ground, it's being jarred a little bit more. And so a lot of times, if you're having like issues with like this leg, it's important to do both sides. So whenever you're doing exercises, if you go to any physical therapist, not just me, better be working both sides, right? You've got 2 legs for a reason, and chances are they're both contributing to something. That makes sense? So that's the importance of stability. So you have mobility, you have that stability, and then coupling those movements, then you're going to be able to have your actions that you want to do, whether it's playing squash, racquetball, okay, sorry. Yeah, whether it's playing racquetball, you need to be able to, okay, what's racquetball? You have to lunge, right? You have to be able to rotate, you have to be able to hit a ball, right? So if that motion hurts you, you better not like go play racquetball and do like 50 of it, you know, or 100 repetitions of it. Especially if you can't control it, but if that feels okay, then great. Then if that bothers you, then break it down. Like, where are you missing? Are you not turning into those hips? So a lot of people who have had like a tennis elbow, right? And then they start doing these types of things, which is all good, but really, tennis elbow, a common culprit, or probable suspect I would look at is actually on this hip, okay, if you're right-handed. And the reason, if you were to go and play tennis, right, as you wind up, right, you have to be able to turn into this hip. And if you don't, it's going to stop, all right? And you might kind of hurt your back a little bit, or you're going to really stretch, and then you're going to put a lot more stress on here because you don't know how to load up this hip to be able to explode out. Does that make sense? There's a guy named Tiger Woods. Everybody knows Tiger Woods, right? Okay, so he hurt his knee, so he's golfing. So as he's golfing, he's winding up, and then he hits the ball, and then what does this knee do? It's going to go in, right? So boom, he tears his ACL, he rehabs it, okay, now I feel better and stronger than ever. So what does he do next? He goes he wants to protect his knee, he doesn't want to let it go in. So where does it come from? It comes from his hip. So his hip is stretched out, and then boom, he tears his labrum, okay? And so you guys remember this, right? He tore his labrum. And so it's like, okay, he rehabs it, he gets surgery, he's out for another year and a half or so. Yeah, I'm back, right? So now what does he do? He still protects his knee. He doesn't want to turn his hips for sure, right? So he stops it and he gets all this motion. You guys tell me where this comes from, right? Yeah. Boom, boom, right? It comes from the lower back. And so now he's back, but he actually just pulled out a recent tournament because his back's not ready, right? And so it's all about just getting everything moving as one unit to be able to facilitate the motions and the activities and the livelihood that you guys want to do. Does that make sense? Okay. So maximizing your potential for injury to overall wellness. Okay, so it's not just one thing to be pain-free. You want to be well, right? You want to, okay, now I'm pain-free. Now I want to do what I want to do. I want to live. I want to play with my kids, my grandkids. I want to be able to roll on the floor. I want to get down and dirty, whenever it comes to it. It's snowing out. Man, it'd be great to be able to trample in the snow. Because that's what living is. It's not about, oh, I can't do this anymore. I can't do that. If you want to do something, there's a way of modifying certain things so you can actually be able to do it, right? And that's where, like, happiness is, being able to connect with friends, right? I mean, we've all canceled an event because you don't necessarily feel like you're up to par for it, right? Like, how was your weekend? I didn't end up going to the movies because I don't know if I can sit for a couple hours, or I canceled my dinner plans because, gosh, I just thought of like sitting in a car for that long, just really bad, right? And so to achieve overall wellness, it's about addressing some of those issues, doing what you can do, making sure that you're successful with it, and then being able to just live your life that you guys want to live. So, yeah, that's it. Cool. Yeah. Walking.
I just love that Tiger Woods story. I just,
Yeah.
he's a public figure, and I just thought, wow, just how you explain the mechanics of it makes perfect sense.
But did anybody explain that to him?
Yeah.
That's,
Right. And, just on behalf of all physical therapists, I apologize. Like, in the sense that, like it was, if you think about rotator cuff injuries, right? Like, rotator cuff injuries haven't really, like exercises, haven't really progressed a whole lot in the past 40 some odd years, right? It's just get a band, strengthen the rotator cuff, right? Okay, you can't do that, okay, then maybe you do it a little less gravity resisted positions and certain things like that. And is that bad for the rotator cuff? No, not necessarily, but what we know about muscles and movements and applying like the science behind like gravity and lever arms, physics 101, right? Like it's your body wants different things, and for some reason, like nobody necessarily sees it. And I'm, guilty as well. It wasn't until this fellowship program that I was like, wow, that makes so much sense. And so they really prided themselves in saying, you know what, if you're not challenging yourself, you're not changing. And change happens by doing something that you're not used to doing, right? That's exactly what change is. So we've all plateaued at some point in our lives about something, right? And so the way that you bust through that plateau is you change the way that you're doing something, right? What does that say? The definition of crazy is insanity, or you're expecting different things by doing the same things.
Yeah, right.
So like I said, yeah, I apologize on like the profession, because it's still out there, right? There's, like Dr. B sounds like a wonderful physician, but you could probably agree that there's not so great physicians out there, right? And then there's awesome PTs out there, and there's not so great PTs out there. There's great chiros, there's not so great chiros. So you're gonna have a mixed bag of things. And so the idea is that, you know, the what's are really easy to find. So you take an MRI of the back, boom, that herniated disc is right there. That's what's wrong, right? That, of course, that's what's generating pain, typically generates pain. So we want to listen to the tissues, of course, so you don't want to just have them do a bunch of things that's going to jack them up. Sorry about that, flare them up. But the reason why that herniated is because of something else, right? So that's the why that you have to really dig into. So if you start thinking about mechanics, so if this is how you hurt yourself, there's too much uncontrolled movement happening on that one spot. Why did that happen? And 9 times out of 10, it's because people's butts don't want to activate. Because what's happening is you're sitting on it, right? You're smashing it of all its blood supply. You smash it of all its blood supply, it doesn't want to facilitate. So if you go up and stand, right, it doesn't necessarily know how to activate. So we've all, instead of like loading up the glutes, sorry, I'm sticking my butt out at you. Instead of loading it up, right, you tend to just kind of do something like this, right? And that just hurts. And so there's like all these different whys behind the what's. And then, okay, what's happened? Okay, that's when we start like loading up the butt. Let's get the butt going. Fire up the butt. And then, okay, the butt's fired, great. Wow, I still have that back bone. Okay, so we've ruled that butt out. Okay, maybe the butt's still in the equation. Sounds weird saying butts all the time. Maybe the butt's still in the equation, and so I think I told Dee Dee, I was like, you're going to see changes in a matter of a few weeks, right? And if you're not seeing changes, then we're not stressing the right tissues enough. And if you're not stressing the right tissues enough, then you're basically plateauing, right? And so if you're plateaued, frustration sets in, and then people lose their momentum to be able to do the things. So if you can make the pain worse by doing something, you should be able to make it better by doing the somewhat opposite or something else. If that makes any sense. And I think Dee Dee kind of can attest to that. Like you're like, oh, that really hurts, and then we do certain things, do it again. Wow, that feels so much better. And so, so you roll the butt out, you know, and it's still herniated, and what do? It's like, okay, it actually hurts when I'm sitting. Okay, when you're sitting, you basically shut the hips out of the equation. When you shut the hips out of the equation, then you're just left with a lot of these arm movements. And so if you think about sitting, whoa! So hips are out of the equation. As you start doing certain things, if you're not getting that motion where we talked about before because of all this, right, then it's just going to get into that lower back, and you just start shearing away at that back by doing all these different things. And then that's where the structural integrity of the disc becomes a little not great. And then you load it up by doing something as simple as picking up a sheet of paper or reaching for something in the oven or something like that. And that's where it blows. And is it because that's a bad movement? Not necessarily, but that sucker's been in the works for, 10, 20, 30 years in the making, right? And so yeah, so those are the whys behind the what's. And so we find out when, by doing certain things, how does your body move? And yeah, that's kind of okay, once you can find how your body's not moving, then you address those signs, and the exercises shouldn't be painful. So an example that I give people is, I'm just going to keep talking unless anyone has any questions. I'll have people do something like this, right? So this is the frontal plane movement that a lot of people don't do. When was the last time you had your arms up over your head, right? When was the last time that you stretched out this way? And whenever that happens, you get a lot of this, right? You just get this. So people's hips don't move. And so by doing this movement, you're just basically shearing that back in that one particular plane. And then, so if it looks more like this, right? I didn't actually bend my back a whole lot, right? If I turn my hips this way, it turns about 60 degrees, 70 degrees. And then as I turn, that lower back actually only is supposed to turn about 30 degrees. Okay, so if this is 60, and then here, right, my back didn't turn that much. But if I stopped and then I really turned, and then that's kind of going into that back. I guess this would go better, right? So if I turn here and then go a little bit, I didn't actually turn my back a whole lot, right? If I stopped here and I turned a whole lot here, then it's really forcing that back to do something that it doesn't really want to do a whole lot.
So it's like only 30
Yeah, if you look at if you Google like the structure of the lower back, the way that these things are lined up, they're called facets, right? It's like in the neck, they're like this, right? And then in the thoracic spine, they come here, and then they kind of merge into doing something like this. And so, yeah. And so people like spondylolisthesis and stuff, and like they have like it's fractured like right there. And that's what can cause some like back problems or like slipping. And it's not because, so that's the what, okay? And then the why it happened, 9 times out of 10, if somebody has like this back issue, I guarantee you it's because they don't know how to internally rotate their hip. And if they don't do that, then it's just gonna stop and you're just gonna keep on getting that movement. Eventually you kind of get this, you know, banging against the facets that we just kind of talked about, and eventually it's just gonna kind of stress fracture and break. Fracture, sorry, yeah, break sounds really bad.
Well, I really appreciate the concepts of the interconnectedness. You know, I think a lot of folks, maybe physicians get fixated, oh, you sprained your ankle, well, let's do all this work on your ankle. Or there's so much other things it's connected to, and it's not just an ankle problem.
Sure, absolutely. For somebody like who has a desk job, right? You know, when was the last time anybody rolled around on the ground? When was the last time anybody has hung like literally did like a dead hang on a bar, right? And so like, if you don't do that and then you expect yourselves to do that, you know, 5 years down the road, or not even 5, maybe even a year, right? Like, and we can all attest to how quickly muscles can just atrophy and just die, is because you don't utilize them. If you don't use it, you really do lose it. And so, just doing just the opposite of this is going to serve wonders, right? Since everybody's sitting and doing all this stuff, I don't want to guarantee this, but I feel like if everybody spent like 5 minutes on their stomach at night, you know, like it would drastically chop the lower back epidemic, like by billions of dollars, because you're just undoing everything that you were doing before, and you're just taking it the other way, right?
I also think a lot of folks think they have to like go to a facility or go to a gym and like work out. There's so many simple things, just daily movements. You can do that even thinking. My favorite story, and maybe some of you heard this before, when I had the opportunity to meet Jack LaLanne, who was amazing.
Oh, yeah.
And this was at a retreat, and at the very end of the day, we've been sitting all day, of course. And he's up on stage, he's being interviewed. He's about 93 at the time.
Sure.
And his wife, Elaine LaLanne, you know, who was about like 80, prancing around like a gazelle. Well, one person in the audience said, well, Mr. LaLanne, we've been sitting here all day. Do you have any advice? He goes, get up. So we go, sit down. So we're laughing, you know, and he's up on stage doing this. Just, you know, we're just hooting and hollering about, you know, yeah, this, you don't have to like work out, you know, moving your body is the name of the game. Look at him.
Absolutely. That's great.
So I have a question that's sort of kind of on topic,
Yeah.
but being afraid of falling. Any tips to how to deal with yourself when you are falling?
When you find yourself
falling, there
falling?
was a little bit of an article this week.
Sure.
So regarding, like, you're talking about during the act of falling, what do you do? Okay. As you're falling, you're losing control of being upright. So my suggestion to people is, there's always that split second when you realize you're not going to catch yourself. And during that split second, that's enough time to usually to find something, because you know your surroundings typically a little bit, whether or not you can grab it. And then so once that split second is up, then I tell people, just don't fight it, just go with it. Does that make sense? So you can squat now. So if you're falling, bend your knees and squat, okay? And then it's going to decelerate the actual impact from the furthest part of your body. Does that make sense? It's natural, it's like that parachute reflex to stick your hands out like that, and that, yeah.
Doesn't work.
Yeah, so because what you're doing is as you're going down, if you were to bend the knees or whatever, like the knees hitting the ground is going to be a lot less force than your arm, because the physics of it, it's closer to the ground, right? And so absorb the shock a little bit through the knees, and then do certain things, right? That's usually the advice that I give to people. I mean, and then, okay, if after you've gotten back up, because you haven't gotten hurt, to challenge it, right? To challenge your balance, to be like, the proprioception, like, stability system is just like another system, right? Your digestive system is going to react if you treat it right and you work it, right? And your muscles are going to be the same thing. So your proprioceptors and your balance and your motor control is your vestibular system, right? And so to challenge your balance by doing various things. So if and when you find yourself in that position again, you're going to be better equipped to know your body and how to catch it. Okay, it's reaction time, it's body awareness. So if my body's over here, what does my body need to do to be able to get myself out of that, right? And so as I mentioned before, walking, all you're doing is you're losing your balance, but you're catching yourself on that one leg. And as you catch yourself on that one leg, it's familiar to you, so you know how to adjust. Does that make sense? And so for you, young lady, I would have you maybe stand against a wall or a corner, right? And don't just stand there and close your eyes, or don't just stand there with one leg, like move, right? Like move like that's where people will start falling, is whenever they try to reach for something and they lose their balance. And then I tell people you have different drivers. The driver is anything that facilitates movement. So if I say, stand there and drive your head up and down, right? Your whole body's going to go with you, right? And that's enough to kind of mess with people's vestibular system. And then, like, what's the use of that? Like, well, you not walk as you're walking, you're bouncing, right? And so your vestibular system allows you to keep that balance. And so by doing that, you're just challenging it. And I go side to side. Oh, my neck hurts. I don't want to do that. Fine, don't do that. Drive your arms. Drive your arms up. Drive your arms down. Not just this, right? Like really reach, because that's where you're going to be losing your balance, right? And then instead of just down here, like reach down, bend the knees a little bit. And then that's just one plane of movement though, right? So then you can balance this way, and balance this way, and then think about other parts of your body moving. And as that becomes easy, do you just go right into here? Not necessarily. You just change your base of support. You just change the way that you're standing, right? You just change the different positions to be able to facilitate the things that you want to do. And do I expect you to spend like 2 hours standing on, in positions, thinking about every which way? No, but like before you sit down, there's still a seat there, so you know you're going to be safe. Maybe you stand on one leg a little bit, or maybe in a grocery store, or brushing your teeth, right? In front of the sink, brush your teeth, right?
Try your non-dominant hand, it's really hard.
Yeah.
You have to think.
And studies show, like, if you use your non-dominant, if you use both sides, then you are like ages ahead of, like, heaven forbid, if you were to get a stroke, right? So you would be eons ahead of. Yeah, you start facilitating certain things. And so,
I'm so happy you came and helped us learn a bit more about body movements. So thank you
Yeah.
so much.